And the last book I read was Big Woods by May Cobb. Sorry. The last book I read was Big Woods by May Cobb. I just kicked a package of Oreo cookies that are on my bed because that's where we keep cookies, right? Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel, Reading in the Dark. My name is Byron and I read sometimes. So this is my first video after a couple of weeks of being away. I was actually on vacation for 2 weeks to visit my family in California and had a really good time. And then I came and I had videos actually made in advance when I left on vacation, so they were like pre-filmed and edited and uploaded and ready to go. So you were getting content while I was gone, and then now since I've been back, I have not had the time to actually film anything new. So it's been a couple of weeks, sorry about that. So I went home to visit my family. There's like a lot going on. Essentially what has happened since I got home is that it turns out I might need to actually make some more room in my house for another person to be renting from me, possibly. And that meant that I had to make some room in my office and take down my big dramatic green screen that I was using to film all these videos for all these months. And that's actually fine because, okay, so like a little backstory, a little bit history lesson on my channel and the green screen thing. I filmed all of my videos on my iPhone for the first year and a couple months. Because I didn't have a better camera and I didn't have money to buy like a real good camera for video. But I actually determined that since I didn't really have good lighting and I didn't have a good camera and I didn't have bookshelves or really any books to speak of at that time, the only really cool backdrop I could come up with was if it were digital. So it was actually easier, believe it or not, for me to film in front of a green wall and put in something later than it would have been for me to figure out how to make an interesting place to film. But I think this is good. I've known for a while that although for me filming in front of the green screen was fun, it was a little bit more work in the editing process, and it was just like a little bit more work on my slow computer. So this is fine with me, and actually I have these nice shelves now and I have all these books, so figure I may as well actually use them, but it won't be quite the same because I'm not going to have like a rolling vista behind me. All of that said, here we are in my new setup. Here I am, I'm sitting here in front of my bookshelf. I have actually 2 of these bookshelves. The other one's on the other side of my bed. My bed is actually right over here, but I'm not going to show you that because it's not made. And that's none of your business anyway. So right here is literary fiction, which is a dumb category. Up here on this shelf that you can't see is like mystery, thriller, suspense, horror books. Down here I have historical fiction, my Mary Renaud Virago Modern Classics collection. They all have really cool covers. And then next to the historical fiction I have biography. And then down here I have all my Tess Gerritsen books, which is basically every book she's published outside of her romantic suspense novels. I have those too, but only on my Kindle. I also have these Funko Pops from the Golden Girls. So this is Sophia, and she lives next to the historical fiction because if you've watched The Golden Girls, you know that she makes up a lot of historical fiction about herself. And then up here, which you can't see by all the thrillers, is Blanche, the kind of person who would read a lot of thriller books. And also, thrillers tend to have a lot of romance in them, so it makes a lot of sense. And I have actually all 4 of them. I've got Dorothy over there next to the classics, and I have Rose next to the Star Trek books. And if you've watched The Golden Girls, those are really where all of these characters should be. So anyway, that's too much about my bookshelf. I'm having a cup of coffee at like 9 o'clock at night, but it's decaf anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference because I don't drink caffeine anymore, which is still going on and is still a success. So that's good, and I haven't been getting dizzy. So cutting caffeine has been really awesome for me. Even by like day 3 of not having caffeine in my diet at all, I already felt that like my energy level was super evened out. Like I had the same amount of energy at 10 o'clock at night as I had when I woke up in the morning. And it stayed level throughout the day. And then of course I get tired and then I go to bed. But like when I want to go to sleep, I know it's time to go to sleep. And what's happening as a result is that I'm going to bed earlier and I'm getting up earlier because of not having caffeine in my life. Which was not anticipated and is actually kind of a cool side effect of not having caffeine. So this video, now that I've gone through all of that, and this video really is my November wrap-up. But I don't have like a ton to say about my November reading because I read 3 books, which actually, November was an awesome reading month for me. I had a really good month of reading. I enjoyed my reading a lot. And I was like chill about it. And even though I only read 3 books, I'm really happy with how my reading went. This was Thrillvember, by the way, in case you didn't see my TBR for November. I generally just don't love the month of November, and I as a result, I tend to slump in November, so I read just all thrillers or horror or whatever in November to just kind of keep the Halloween vibes going and to avoid a slump. And so I read 3. And the first one I read was Dracul by Dacre, Stoker, and J.D. Barker, and this is like sort of a prequel to Dracula. Dacre Stoker is like the great-grand-nephew, I believe, of Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula. And he was Irish. And basically, Dracul is a book that I have wanted to read for a long time. I've heard a lot of good things about it. And I got it on... actually, I have... Oh, you know what? I lent it to a friend. A friend who I punched in the face. So, funny story, tangent. Today at work, I was talking to, here's me. There's, over there in the distance is person 2. Okay, and then my friend, person 3, why am I, it's not code. Her name is Meg. My friend Meg was coming up behind me, and I didn't know she was there, and I was telling a story to somebody, and I made like a gesture. It wasn't like a wild, crazy gesture, but I made like a gesture, and it hit her right in the face with my elbow, right in the nose. And so I texted her a little while ago to be like, hey, how's your face? Anyway, so she's borrowing Dracul because she also loves horror and she loves Dracula. And she's absolutely adoring the book, which is not a surprise to me. Anyway, that's why I can't hold it up. But she's loving it, and I'm not surprised because I have to tell you guys I loved this book. It was so good. Okay, this was a 5-star book. I'll just come right out and say it. Dracul was 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. It's written in an epistolary format, just like Dracula is, which means it's told through, it's like a compilation of letters or documents or whatever, but these are all letters. And sometimes newspaper clippings and stuff like that. And it's written primarily by Bram Stoker. I mean, the letters are written by, in this book, the character of Bram Stoker. So basically, Dracul tells the sort of coming-of-age story of Bram Stoker. And he's now been fictionalized by his great-grandnephew. And has all of these experiences that are familiar to anyone who has read Dracula and inspire and become part of Dracula later. So this book was a success on many levels for me. It totally succeeded in capturing Bram Stoker's voice. I have read Dracula 3 times. It is one of my favorite books. I adore it. Now, granted, it's been a year since the last time I reread it, but I absolutely felt like I was reading Dracula. It felt very much like reading Bram Stoker. I felt like I was reading just like, the prequel or like another volume in a series or something written by the same author. Like, it totally captured the tone and the atmosphere of Dracula. I liked how it contributed to and adhered to the vampire lore that's in Dracula. And I was weirded out and skeptical about the concept of Bram Stoker being a character in the book, but it worked beautifully. And what is really neat is that it actually adds to and supports Dracula. It makes Dracula a more interesting read, and it supports that preface. And makes Dracula himself, the Count, actually a slightly more interesting character. And I really am looking forward to rereading Dracula now at some point, having read this, even though it's like headcanon and not like official or anything. Because it really did contribute so much. So it really was a success for me. Now, what's funny is that I read this book over the course of like 2 weeks or something, because I was on vacation. So I was visiting my family. So I read it very slowly. I read a couple of chapters and then I would go to sleep. And then I would spend the day with my family and then I would read a couple chapters and go to sleep. So it sort of spaced the book out for me, which is kind of cool actually, because I feel like that added to the charm of the format, of the epistolary format. Because obviously when you're sending letters back and forth, it takes a while to... Anyway, it's funny that I read the book. It took me so long to read it because if I hadn't been on vacation, I definitely would have read it faster. But I mean, I loved it. I loved it anyway. So, it was fantastic. Yeah, no, it was a fast, fun read, 5 stars. And then the next book I read was sort of a very popular new release by Ruth Ware called The Turn of the Key. The Turn of the Key, unsurprisingly, is a sort of modern retelling of Henry James' classic gothic horror novella, The Turn of the Screw, which I read about a year ago for the first time, and I really liked. Henry James is hard to read, but I really enjoyed that. So, The Turn of the Key. Going into this, I was a little trepidatious because I've heard very wishy-washy things about Ruth Ware, and I really like The Turn of the Screw, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't love this book. It's gotten 5 stars from some people that I really admire on BookTube or respect, and so that's interesting to me. But yeah, it's about basically a woman who has been charged with the murder of a child that she was nannying in this like super technologically advanced smart home. And she's writing a letter from prison to a lawyer asking him to please represent her because she didn't kill the child. And then the whole book is her writing letters to him, telling him what happened in excruciating detail. So it's epistolary as well. So the first thing that kind of turned me off is that I didn't... Okay, the house itself was a little silly. I just thought the description of the smart home was like it went a little bit too far. It was a little bit science fiction-y to me, almost. But also, there's so much real-life technology in smart home automation and stuff these days. It was odd to me that Ruth Ware didn't mention... I mean, I guess I understand why, but she didn't mention any specific brand or products or, like, you know, there was no Alexa or Siri or any of that kind of stuff. It was all just, like, this... I don't know, this amorphous, like, new, like, fanciful, fictional home automation system called Happy. And it was just, like, too much. It was not believable to me, and it was a little bit silly. So I didn't love that. And then, honestly, the whole child caring thing, you know, the narrator tells a lot of stories about, like, you know, her past being working in a child care facility. And then nannying these kids, and, like, I don't care much about the whole child care thing. Like, I'm not a parent. I don't have, like, a parental bone in my body, and, like, obviously I respect parents, but, like, that stuff was boring to me. It sort of felt like a babysitting journal to me for a while, which is not too thrilling. And then I had a major problem with the book supposedly being an epistolary format novel. This is, like, 2 letters, maybe 3 letters, the whole book. It's like 400 pages, and it's like this epic letter. And as it went on and on and on, I was like, but wait, what? Because there's like not chapters. In the Kindle edition, the chapters are numbered because I think the Kindle has to number them, and it's just like there's no way around it. But when you get to the beginning of each chapter, there's no number and there's no heading. So it's like it's just one big book and there are no chapters. And I don't know what the print version looks like. I'm kind of curious about that, actually. But, no, I did pick it up, actually. And it's the same. It's just like, you know, you have a short page, end of, like, a chapter. And then you turn, and then you have a new beginning, but there's no number and no chapter name. And it seemed very arbitrary to me. And then it's not like that was a new letter. There's no, like, date and, like, dear Mr. So-and-so. So anyway, last time I wrote you, I was telling you about this, but you may be wondering, blah, blah, blah. So let me pick up where I left off, or, like, there was no information about the people that she was in prison with. Her story in present tense in her prison situation was not explored at all, which I found, I mean, almost not at all. Like, there was very little right at the beginning, and they're just... I did not get the impression that I was reading letters at any point in this entire book. It did not feel like it was letters. It's sort of, and this is a calloused thing to say and cynical and probably not true. But it almost felt like the book was nearing completion, and, you know, Ruth Ware's editor was like, ooh, what if it was, you know, epistolary? And then they just sort of imposed that on it after the fact. It did not feel like it did not feel like a series of letters. I did not, and on the very rare occasions that she addresses the person that she's supposedly writing this massively long letter to, I was shocked and pulled out of the story because I was like, oh, right, this is the letter. This is that letter. I was like, who is she talking to? She's talking to me? Oh, she's talking to that lawyer. And it only happened like once or twice in the whole book. So I just thought, you know, the adaptation and the updating of the story of Turn of the Screw was fine. It was certainly entertaining. It was a page turner. I get why she's a popular author because, you know, I read the book very quickly. And there were some good red herrings in there and whatever. But I thought it was a little silly with the house. And I think in terms of an epistolary novel, it was a big fail for me. This is not an epistolary novel. This is not. I mean, it technically is. But then the ending really frustrated me too, and it was very confusing and didn't make a lot of sense, and it requires you to kind of go back to make sense of what you're reading, and it was just a frustrating read to me, and I didn't love it, and I gave it 3 stars because I did get through it quickly, and I didn't hate it, but yeah, I just didn't love it. Well, one of the redeeming qualities to this book, I will say, was that the main character, the narrator, she was a flawed character and she wasn't perfectly likable all the time. And I think that's cool. Anyway, I gave it 3 stars. I will read another Ruth Ware, but if this really is her best novel to date, which a lot of people have said, then I'm kind of not expecting much. Anyway, so that's 3 stars. And then the last book I read was Big Woods by May Cobb. Sorry. The last book I read was Big Woods by May Cobb. I just kicked a package of Oreo cookies that are on my bed because that's where we keep cookies, right? So I read Big Woods by May Cobb. This was very enjoyable. This was I found out about this book on Out of the Becks channel a really long time ago. This tells the story of a little girl who was kidnapped during the 80s, during the satanic panic period where everybody is afraid that there are Satan worshippers everywhere and all around them. And it's narrated by 2 narrators. It alternates back and forth between the voice of Sylvia, who is an older woman who lives in the same town, who used to be a nurse, and then a girl named Leah, who is the older sister to the little girl who was kidnapped. And I loved both of these narrators. I loved being in their heads. I really enjoyed the time that I spent in their heads. And I liked the setting. I liked this little town that is sort of nestled nearby this area of big woods, they call it. And the vibe of all the satanic stuff was eerie and interesting to read about. And I loved how Sylvia told a lot of her own backstory as with being a nurse and some of her history. If you've watched my channel before, you know that I love books that contain, flashbacks to anecdotes of someone's life and a life that has been lived over the past many, many decades. And I just love that stuff. I loved the character of Sylvia. I really liked reading Leah as well. The vibe was fun. The climax was really tense. I was on the edge of my seat. It was a page turner like nobody's business. There were some elements. There were some elements in the story that aren't necessarily to my taste, but so it wasn't a perfect read for me. I don't want to go into exactly what they were because it would be a spoiler, but I really enjoyed the book. It was really, really awesome, and I gave it 4 stars. So that's it. So those are the 3 books I read. I actually did pick up The Bookseller by Cynthia Swanson because I really enjoyed The Glass Forest by Cynthia Swanson. But I think I read a page or 2 before falling asleep. And then basically I ran out of November. So I think I'm going to leave The Bookseller and move on to my December reads. But I'm not totally sure what they are. So I might be able to fit The Bookseller in. And I will get into all of that in my December TBR video, which theoretically should be up tomorrow. So whenever this is posted, which I think will be on the 2nd. So probably the TBR will be filmed tomorrow for me and posted tomorrow for you on the 3rd. So I'll get into that later. But yeah, so for November, let's see, I had a 5-star, a 3-star, and a 4-star. So that's pretty good. So that's my wrap up for November. It's pretty lengthy because there was lots of like house cleaning and like business at the beginning of this video, but I think that's okay. And I guess I will just see you all in the next video. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being patient and waiting for me. I hope you enjoy the new setup here. If you have any notes for me on my setup and my lighting or whatever, let me know. I think it looks pretty cool. It's definitely lower maintenance for me, which is good, so that it doesn't take me hours to edit a video, which I'm not exaggerating when I say that sometimes is what was the case. So yeah, so that's my wrap up for November. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate you hitting that thumbs up button, and that helps me a lot. And if you love the video and you want to see more like this, you can subscribe to my channel, and that would help me out even more. And until next time, I will be here in the dark reading.